Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Rena, and welcome to
Biopic, a podcast story. This is a podcast where we dissect the good, bad, ugly, and absurd of this specific genre of motion picture, the biopic. If you want to learn more about us, our scoring system, and how we choose movies, please check out our special introductory episode. Introduction: Who are we and what are we doing?
Sarah. What movie are we doing this week?
This week we will be talking about Liz and Dick. And Rena, can you give us the trigger warning?
This movie contains depictions of alcohol abuse, pill popping, furniture destruction, glassware destruction, verbal abuse, fat shaming, and major fiscal negligence.
And Rena, can you also give us the spoiler warning?
Spoiler warning. We are going to spoil everything, including possibly the major plot points in works of narrative art having nothing to do with this particular movie. Consider yourself warned.
So some of the sources we used in creating this episode include My Life with Cleopatra, The Making of a Hollywood Classic by Walter Wanger, and Furious Love, Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, and The Marriage of the Century by Sam Kashner and Nancy Schoenberger. And if those sound familiar, they were books that we also read for the Cleopatra episode.
Sarah, can you please tell us a little bit about Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton's marriage and the made-for TV movie Liz and Dick, which, as is the case with most Lifetime movies, was shot in 20 days.
I guess I'll tell you about it. I'm not that excited. Elizabeth Taylor was born February 27th, 1932, passed March 23rd, 2011. She was a British and American actress. She began her career as a child actress in the early 1940s, and she was one of the most popular stars of classic Hollywood cinema in the 1950s. She became the world's highest paid movie star in the 1960s and remained a well-known public figure for the rest of her life. Richard Burton was born Richard Walter Jenkins Jr. in 1925, and he passed in 1984. He was a Welsh actor. He established himself as a, quote, formidable Shakespearean actor in the 1950s and gave a memorable performance as Hamlet in 1964, which put a pin in that. We will get to it. He was called the natural successor to Olivier by the theater critic Kenneth Tynan, but his perceived failure to live up to those expectations disappointed some colleagues and critics, and his heavy drinking added to the disappointment that everyone felt in him. That's all from our friends at Wikipedia. These two met on the set of Cleopatra in 1963 while they were both married, and subsequently divorced their spouses and got married in 1964. They made 11 films together. They earned a combined $88 million over the next decade, and they spent every penny of it based on this film. They divorced in 1974, remarried in 1975, divorced in 1976, and Burton would remarry the same year to a model named Susie Hunt. And a little bit about the movie that we watched. Liz and Dick was a television movie for Lifetime. The film premiered on November 25th, 2012. It brought in 3.5 million viewers. It was the fourth most watched movie that aired on that channel in 2012, behind the TV remake of Steel Magnolias, Drew Peterson Untouchable, and Abducted, the Carlina White story. It also received generally unfavorable reviews. It has a 28% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's probably not that controversial a viewpoint to say that I hated this. I hate being in the world. Rena, any opening thoughts you want to share?
The Cleopatra costumes in this look like they were purchased at Party City compared to Cleopatra. And we remarked in that no, we're seeing a lot of rayon and synthetics in like the 1960s glamour version of what they thought ancient Egypt looked like. But these are like what you would buy stuffed into a bag at those seasonal Halloween stores to go as Elizabeth Taylor in Cleopatra.
Everything looks extremely flammable, including the wigs. And also everything looks like crap. And I I know that they tried really hard on some aspects of this, and I appreciate that, but we don't have an effort category, so I'm gonna call this what it is, which is like it looks terrible. Everything looks terrible. The number of times I just ask myself, why is this here? Why is this happening? Like, why did we do this, Lifetime? I mean, and I know why we did it, because they have like countless hours of television to fill. They have money to make these things. They have people willing to make them. And so it goes. We open on a photo montage. And I will give them this. Lindsay Lohan looks a lot like Elizabeth Taylor. I will not say the same for her acting, but she looks a lot like her. And this photo montage, just in time, the Jules Stein song is playing over it, and we're seeing pictures of them kissing and giving jewelry to each other, and there's just names and names and names of people going by after Lindsay Lohan's name, who you're like, who is this? And then all of a sudden we get to Creed Bratton and Steve from Sex and the City, David Eigenberg.
David Eigenberg, I enjoyed the 90 seconds he was in this movie. I don't know what David Eigenberg was doing in here. At least Liz and Dick was fairer to David Eigenberg than the writer's room for And Just Like That, but that is more of a comment on how I feel about what And Just Like That did to Steve.
He's always been absolutely adorable. I speculate someone like him or like Creed Bratton would be in this movie for 90 seconds. You have to log a certain number of hours working professionally every year to maintain your eligibility for SAG, which is where you get your wonderful health benefits as an actor. I could speculate that director of this film, Lloyd Kramer, maybe helped one or both of them bury a body at some point and decided to call in the favor.
Have I heard the name Lloyd Kramer before? Has he done anything respectable?
In terms of filmmaking, no. It's been a lot of Lifetime stuff. I'm sure he's a wonderful human being. I'm sure like all of these people are wonderful human beings. I'm sure they're good parents. They're probably good partners. They probably do their best to clean up after each other and like make sure to like open the doors for people who need the doors open for them. I'm sure these are all good people, but this film is garbage. The energy that this film has from the jump is like, we are all just trying to get by.
Some people in this have respectable credits here and there. The New Zealander that they hired to play a Welshman had been on True Blood. He had an episode of Mad Men. Like, there are people in this who had respectable credits in the aughts. And we know Miss Lohan's story. She made 2 films that everybody loved, and people are always ready to forgive her, and she's never ready to step up to it for a variety of reasons.
This is a performance sponsored by Ambien. Like, it feels like if she didn't know she was on the set making this movie, which Grant Bowler swears that she was and that she was trying her best, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if she said, I made this, I was asleep, wasn't I? By the 21st day was I smeared in peanut butter that I had taken out of the refrigerator. Had I bought a bunch of Richard Simmons like deal-a-meal cards on the internet without realizing it? I was asleep. I was on drugs. I don't know what happened, because that's the energy she brings to this. She looks like her, but she opens her mouth and you're like, oh, you did nothing to prepare for this.
That could explain the black box framing device, which we will get to. I think the black box is my least favorite framing device, although thank God there were no inner children in this.
Yeah, but man, that black box, oh.
When you say she had no energy or she was on Ambien, that could have been a reason it was something that enabled her to remain sitting.
It sounds like everyone was exhausted making it. The film was investigated for abusing the actors and union rules on the set because they were so hard charging to get this done. And the producer of this film, a fellow named Larry Thompson, who I'm sure cleans up after his dog when he walks his dog and probably picks up his neighbor's mail when they go on vacation. He created a, quote, short list of actresses for the part, which included Lindsay Lohan, also Megan Fox, Olivia Wilde, and Kate Beckinsale. And I'm like, yeah, they were on your list. I'm sure Olivia Wilde was like, yeah, I'll return that call never.
Olivia Wilde and Megan Fox are both peaking around that time.
Yeah.
They're not going to be in this. Kate Beckinsale ruined the second half of The Aviator, and I'm not crazy about her, but
she's not making this movie. Yeah, Kate Beckinsale responded with a, yeah, we're not making Lifetime movies. I've got all of that underworld money. And they said that they wanted to find someone who was at least Australian to play Richard Burton.
Because all Commonwealth accents sound the same to them.
To Lifetime viewers, of course they do. The actor playing his brother was so Welsh that I was like, is there a translator in the room?
The actor that they found to play Richard Burton's brother looked a lot like Jeffrey Jones.
I don't think he's still in prison, but he has had subsequent arrests for failing to update his sex offender status.
This actor looked like Jeffrey Jones, but I knew there was no way that it could be Jeffrey Jones.
The title card says it's the last day of Richard Burton's life, and he's writing a letter to Liz, and he addresses it to Liz Taylor Belair, and I guess it's going to get there. And then we cut to the black box, where it looks like they're watching the movie with us at points, because they're like looking at something together and talking about how he fell in love with her the first time he saw her at a party, and she just thought, oh, he's some snooty actor from Great Britain. And then we cut to the set of Cleopatra, where Joe Mankiewicz is seen upright. So this is before he was at the point in the movie where he was being rolled around on a stretcher trying to get it done. And he tells Richard Burton to keep Elizabeth occupied. The broad strokes of this film are more or less accurate, based on my understanding. They're just retold in a boring way, and also like the dialogue is stifled and not great, so it's not particularly compelling to watch. But in general, like, these things happened. Like, he showed up on the set of that movie, and maybe Joe Mankiewicz told him to do that. Maybe he didn't. Who the heck knows? He does the introductory line of, "Has anyone ever told you you're a very pretty girl?" Which was kind of a neg as presented in my reading material, but he says it in this way that has this sincerity that causes her to be like, and stomp off in her wig. Do you want to be bummed out about the wigs?
Yeah.
The makeup and hair was done by a woman named Beatrice Marie de Alba. She's an Academy Award-winning hairstylist and makeup artist. She won the Academy Award for Frida. I picture her like, do you remember the Nicholson Batman?
Yes.
Okay, you know the scene where he falls into the toxic dip and he goes to that surgeon and that like upstairs Hollywood medical office where the guys points at the tools and he's like, "I did my best, sir, but these are the tools I have," and points at like a rusty spoon and a dull knife and a pair of scissors. And I kind of picture her like being like that, where she's like, I'm going to do the best I can with this Party City budget and this Party City wig collection. And then he gets his brother, Welsh Jeffrey Jones, to find out where she's going to dinner. Like, Liz starts talking loudly about how insulted she was by his remark. And then he starts talking loudly about how he wanted to say all this other, like, not particularly romantic stuff, where he's like, you're a beautiful woman now who's come into the flower and bloom of beauty and fullness and whatever. And they continue to subtweet each other like that. And then Burton gets super drunk.
How much of this did they actually say or do? What were they basing any of this off of?
They took like an amalgamation of things and made it into these moments. So is it possible that they were saying dumb stuff that everyone was like forced to say sounded cool? It's also very possible that they were constantly saying beautiful things and this movie just couldn't capture it. They are on the set the next day, and Burton's super hungover from being out with Welsh Jeffrey Jones all night. And she takes him into her tiny trailer, which we know from our Cleopatra episode. She had tiny nothing on the set of that. She had like a villa and a billion people there to wait on her hand and foot. But they go sit in her tiny trailer and she gives him a drink and he tries to hit on her. And then she goes to 100 and is like, the Welsh down one. She's just like going back and forth between sleepwalking and like kind of like babyish snarling in this movie. So then we see them at a restaurant again and Eddie's there. Eddie Fisher. So as we know, she was on her fourth husband at this point, who was one Eddie Fisher, who she married in grief after Mike Todd died. Before Mike Todd, she was married to Michael Wilding. Before Michael Wilding, she was married to Conrad Hilton, who was an abusive asshole. So she had every right to divorce him. They're aloof with each other and kind of cool. And her mother is then the next day prepping her for this love scene that they're filming.
What was up with Taylor's relationship with her mom?
She was close with her mother, and her mother was very much a stage mother. I don't think her mom was there with her, based on my understanding. I think she's there to kind of fill in as like a confidant. Also, Liz was kind of a big baby.
Can't state enough in these Cleopatra scenes how little anything we see here resembles anything in the movie Cleopatra. Would you agree with me, Sarah?
Oh, 100%. Yes.
The sets, too, look nothing like the real Cleopatra. And they don't go into talking about the expense issues because they must have realized we can't make this convincing. I feel like they didn't make any effort at all to try to make it look like anything, even though it's all photographically preserved. Something with a budget could have redone that. It all looks cheap. Some of the wardrobe is decent. Some of the dresses that they have her in look really good, but it's like they decided, okay, we're going to sink the budget on certain things here and there and just hope that that's enough to carry us and not worry about the rest. And Grant Bowler does not have Richard Burton's calves. He cannot get away with the male miniskirt.
Everything is just like, it feels like it's kind of like a vague representation of a thing that happened or of like the set of Cleopatra. Like they do make it look like it was just like any other movie. And it wasn't like this crazy, chaotic, overrun nightmare, which it very much was, as we recall. You know, like at the end, when they call That's a Wrap, Joe Mankiewicz is standing up as if it's just a normal film. And I'm like, Joe Mankiewicz was on a stretcher.
Nobody ever said that's a wrap on the set of Cleopatra. And then they make some reference to the script for Cleopatra, but there was no shooting script. It was all being written after shooting had ended for the next day. And then they say that's a wrap, but then you see them both in costume later. Yeah. I don't know if that was a continuity thing or if there was something that got cut about, whoops, we have to reshoot some stuff.
And also they film their first love scene and they just start making out. And no, they're not doing the dialogue from the movie. He has that line about like her breasts are love and sex and nurturing and everybody's like, woo! And they're all of a sudden they're having their affair. And it's like a sequence out of a Ken Ludwig play where it's just like lend me a tenor level door slamming and chaos. And everyone's redirecting Eddie or redirecting his wife Sybil to try and make sure that they're able to hide the hooking up.
This is played like a lightweight sex comedy bit, but it's not that great, where they're saying, Mrs. Burton, you go here. Mr. Fisher, you go here. But the actor they cast as Eddie Fisher is not at all memorable, but Eddie Fisher, I don't know if anyone still listens to his work much.
Eddie Fisher is not memorable, but I can tell you this is an actor named Andy Hirsch. And the reason why I know who he is because he played one John Griffin, Andrea Zuckerman's love interest on season 2 of Beverly Hills 90210.
Which I was not allowed to watch.
And which I've watched far too many times. And then they're back in the black box. And we also get our one scene with Creed Bratton here.
They are delivering some pretty awful dialogue in the black box scenes that nobody asked for except to fill in time on this script and possibly to make for faster shooting.
This is not a creative way to have the two actors who are the stars of it seemingly watching their own movie from hell. And commenting on like what was going on and like telling you like in text.
Is this supposed to be the afterlife? Is Burton and Taylor's equivalent of Sartre's No Exit to be made to watch Liz and Dick, the 1 hour version, over and over again and comment on it?
I hate the black box too because it's super lazy. It is the technique you use when you have 20 days to shoot a movie and you need to explain a lot of stuff and you can't show it because you don't have time to show it and you don't have budget to show it.
There are a lot of restaurant interiors where you see a few tables. There are a lot of hotel rooms. The boat looks real later. When things are shooting, it does not look anything like the level of production that you see in a Hollywood movie in any era.
There's some green screen when they pull up right in front of the Spanish Steps in front of the parking spot that I'm sure is right there. It's like Microsoft PowerPoint. The green screen's real bad in this.
So what did you think of Creed Bratton's cameo?
I loved it. He was
Me
the
too.
star of the movie. He was playing Daryl Zanuck, and he came in and they defined paparazzi. And then Creed Bratton was like, I'm done now. I've paid back my debt to Larry Thompson and Lloyd Kramer. They're going to keep my body secret safe, and I'm going to go now. Richard goes to a party at Liz's and basically like cuckolds Eddie publicly and demands that Liz tell them which of the two of them that they loved. And then her mom's all like, this is your 4th marriage.
Did this party scene happen?
I don't think so. I think that there were confrontational moments, and Liz went back and forth between the two of them quite a bit. And there was a lot of like hurt and angst going on in this quadrangle. And then they drive away together, and he's saying all this cringy stuff to them as they're in this villa somewhere in Italy, which we do know that they did have a place that they hid out in Italy, because she had a mysterious black eye from one of their wild nights out there. And he's reciting Shakespeare to her and just like saying icky stuff. And then they're driving around and they pick up some new jewels. They didn't name check Bulgari because I'm sure they couldn't. Then he finds out that Sybil has tried to kill herself, and you hear a paparazzi yell like, "Buongiorno, Mr. Burton! Suicide! Sybil!" And he's like, "Suicide, yes." And he has to run and go be with Sybil, who has tried to kill herself. And we have a little sighting of baby Kate Burton here.
What out of this actually happened?
She did try to kill herself. There were at least a few attempts of suicide all over the place in this love quadrangle. Like Liz definitely was hospitalized at least once for overdosing on pills, possibly in attempt to commit suicide. Like, Richard Burton has the distinction in this story of having two women try to kill themselves over him, which is really something.
Yeah, I don't know whether he was worth it.
A PSA for anyone listening. No one is worth killing yourself over. And certainly not Richard Burton. So he doesn't even win an Oscar. Spoiler. I love when he goes to Liz, though, because he's saying, like, I have to go back to Sybil. And then Liz, like, throws, like, bottle number 1 of 20 against a wall, because that is an acting choice that happens many times in this film. And then downs, like, some pills, and he's like, how many did you take? And she's like, all of them.
Isn't it more expensive if you have to deal with glass breaking everywhere and reshooting? Like, I feel like there are better things they could have sunk the budget on than dealing with filming so many breaking bottle scenes.
How else are you going to show that you're upset when you have 20 days, though? Like, you certainly can't ask her to cry. There's not time for acting.
Grant Bowler really bit off more than he could chew.
This is Lifetime getting out of their depth here. Like, they do not have the budget to make this look good. I also, like, I think addicts are boring, and watching two people, like, live in an endless cycle of chaos that is being presented to us as a loving relationship is not that interesting. You're watching them be chaotic together, to never learn, to never grow beyond just, like, this lust and, like, this, like, I'm going to spend more money and throw more money and liquor at this problem. And it's like watching two people, like, replicate that behavior over and over. I don't find their relationship particularly compelling. And respect for people who can live in this level of chaos, like where they're living on a boat because they're trying to avoid paying taxes.
He would spend an amount on trinkets for her that was equivalent to what he made off a single film.
Yeah. I mean, I said it up top. They made $88 million combined during that time period. No doubt in my mind, they spent every cent on trinkets and 1635 first editions of John Donne poetry and a Michelangelo that she just hangs on the wall.
She says it's a Van Gogh. It is known that Elizabeth Taylor owned a Van Gogh that she bought in 1963, so at least it's accurate that she would have owned that painting. But the painting they have standing in for the one that I looked up that she owned just looks impressionistic. I thought, is that a Monet? No, the color's off. And it could turn out I'm totally wrong and that they had the set people do a reasonable copy of Miss Taylor's Van Gogh, but I don't think so.
I suspect that piece of art is from Baron Bed Bath & Beyond de Medici, if I were to guess a vintage on that particular piece of art. And they did end their affair, and she was, like, laying around saying, I'm so bored, which I do love that line.
That is good. She yells, I'm bored. That was well delivered. And
she doesn't know how to play games with her children because she's never been able to play games because she's always working. They did rekindle their relationship as a friendship initially, starting to meet for lunch, and then, you know, you can't keep these two apart because it's so romantic. And they start hooking up again. And he's going to take a role in the film The VIPs. And Liz is like, I'm going to be in that movie with you. And
when they're replicating Burton Taylor films, the one that they choose later on is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which I haven't seen. I was wondering if the only actual dialogue they could use due to the 70 and 90 year thing on public domains was the Shakespeare.
To be fair, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is not my favorite movie. I don't remember the dialogue well enough, but I'm almost willing to bet my life on it, not the dialogue written by Edward Albee.
The ones that they show to show the making, where they're both on the set at the same time, are ones that were set in the present day, not Beckett, which is not even mentioned here, not Anne of 1,000 Days, even though you can still rent actual costumes from Anne of 1,000 Days. That's how well made they were. Because that would have involved budget.
I don't even know if it matters what movie they were on. Like, they could have just made up movies for all it matters, because like it's a real, like, who cares? Like, this relationship at no point sort of moves forward. It starts at a 9, it stays at a 9 the whole time, and then it kind of just like fritters off.
A story about the jewelry. At one point later in the film, she's shown wearing a large, somewhat tear-shaped pearl, which I think is supposed to be a representation of the pearl known as La Peregrina, which is one of the many baubles that Burton bought for Taylor. The actual La Peregrina was from the Spanish crown jewels. Previous owners of it included Elizabeth I's sister, Mary Tudor, Mary I, for whom it was a present from her husband, Philip of Spain. There were paintings of her wearing it, but it was one of the things that Burton bought for Taylor, and at one point, La Peregrina, which I don't know if it still holds this record, but for centuries it was considered the largest or one of the largest natural pearls in the world. At one point, one of Elizabeth Taylor's lapdogs swallowed La Peregrina, and they had to, like, make the dog cough it up.
Also in the VIP sequence, Charles Shaughnessy, who played on The Nanny, the guy whose house she worked at, shows up as the director of the VIPs, who was a fella named Anthony Asquith. And he is also in and out of the movie in under 30 seconds. Somewhere in here, Sybil says, yeah, fine, we can get a divorce. And they are going to go out and celebrate. And no one wants to hang out with them because they're disgusting cheaters.
Did you notice the couples that they name dropped? Wallace and David?
Yes. Who are Wallace and David?
I believe that's supposed to be the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. But I can't remember whether they said Wallace and David or Wallace and Edward. All sorts of things wrong with this. But yeah, they name drop a lot of people from the era.
And then they're back in the hotel. There is a butler, hotel worker, in this scene where they are fighting about what to do next with their lives. And the butler is like in his own movie. This is an actor named Henry Hereford, and he's giving like a Bill Skarsgård energy here, like just kind of like this wide-eyed, like back and forth sort of watching them. And I was like, that's the star of the movie. This is the only person who showed up and worked. And he was great. And he said very little. And they decided to go to New York so he can do Hamlet on Broadway.
So I did nearly as much research for Liz and Dick as the screenwriters for Liz and Dick did on Liz and Dick. I don't know if it was a modern dress Hamlet or if this was a budget cut. I don't know how anyone saw this thing, and I know they're in the last scene of Hamlet.
Burton was very tuned into the fact that he didn't have a lot of work that he had done in which he was in modern dress. So this was a modern looking Hamlet. He says the rest is silence, which is what Hamlet says just before he dies. And then the curtain drops. But the last 2 pages, when they wrap things up after Hamlet dies, are actually important.
He seems perfectly healthy up until he just goes into a slouch where he like folds in on himself sitting up. I don't know if this particular production chose that point to cut out.
I think that they probably put as much care and attention into this production of Hamlet in the movie as they did to everything else. They leave the theater and everyone's protesting them. Like someone holds up a sign that says slut on a hot tin roof, which is my second best performance in this film. And we go into a sequence where there's like sometimes 2 lines, sometimes 1 line in a scene where she finally gets Eddie to grant her divorce. They get married. I do love her wedding dress.
Is it a copy of the wedding dress that she wore?
I don't know if you remember when there was a company called ABS that used to make very quick, down and dirty copies of Oscar dresses.
I remember seeing the version that they did of, remember Nicole Kidman wore that like slit up the leg fur trimmed, I think it was
a Galliano, right?
Yeah, it was a Galliano for Dior that she wore at the Academy Awards, and they came out with like a $250 version of it in time for prom.
This is like the ABS facsimile of that dress.
If there's pictures of what it looked like and you're not trying, don't make the frickin' movie.
That's kind of like the whole energy of all of this particular TV movie is just like the why of it all. Like you can't even begin to approximate, the grandeur of that era of filmmaking and how like they were putting a ton of money on the screen. You can't approximate the beauty of the fashion. You can't approximate the chaos that they lived in. Why make this? Besides money.
I appreciate that they keep saying where we are and when we are, even if it's like 3 months or 6 months and they keep saying the year. I don't expect people to age that much if it's over a few years in the 60s, but I remember there were rumors that Lindsay Lohan refused to wear a fat suit, even in scenes where Taylor's weight was way up, and they're commenting on it. She's like, oh, I need this enormous ring to make my fat hand look skinnier, but her hand doesn't look any different. It doesn't make sense. Her body does not appear to change throughout the film.
She, there's like a vanity energy about her in this movie up until the end when we see her as White Diamonds, Liz Taylor, where she doesn't age even a little bit.
In one of the black box scenes, there's a comment about, I had to buy a 69 karat diamond to cover that trach scar, but she never has a tracheotomy scar.
I guess it's always covered by jewelry in this, but yeah.
They do a good job with the fake jewelry.
Yeah, she was just dripping with diamonds. They run into Ernest Lehman, who's played by David Eigenberg, who is in and out of this movie super fast, who proposes that she do Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and then she's like, what about Richard?
They do a little improv fight for David Eigenberg, who convincingly acts impressed with this. Grant Bowler does not have the gravitas to remind me of Richard Burton, and Lindsay Lohan sounds nothing like her. David Eigenberg, I enjoyed his 90 seconds in this film very much. If I give any casting points, it will be for Creed Bratton, the hotel guy, and David Eigenberg, who I'm happy to see show up in anything.
They did behave like frickin' children on the set of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. There was a constant need to make sure that they were getting equal treatment on the set. They were getting the same size for baskets and things like that.
There's an Academy Awards where he loses to Lee Marvin, but Lee Marvin was barrel full of monkeys fun in Cat Ballou. Do you have any insights into this particular Oscars and why Lee Marvin won? It sounds like there was a case where there were a lot of big names canceling each other out.
He was actually a big star at that time. So Lee Marvin had been in, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and had been consistently working and was really critically acclaimed for this movie. He won the Silver Bear at the Berlin International Film Festival for that. It is not an award that's frequently given in concert with the Academy Award. It was Richard Burton for The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, Laurence Olivier for Othello, Rod Steiger for The Pawnbroker, and Oscar Werner for Ship of Fools. And I don't, unfortunately, know much about that production of Othello, but he played the part you don't want him to play.
Oh.
Look up 1965 Othello.
Oh, no.
Uh-huh.
Oh, my God, this blackface looks horrible. How was this still okay? I was waiting. Well, were Poitier and Belafonte too young? But, oh man.
Poitier certainly had the chops to carry that off in 66. This is insane. I'm really glad he didn't win an Oscar for being in blackface. Rod Steiger would get an Oscar, I think, the next year for In the Heat of the Night, which was well earned. I can speculate wildly with absolutely no evidence as to why Lee Marvin would have won, but I think it's delightful that someone wins for a comedy performance because we overlook those all the time. I haven't seen The Spy Who Came In from the Cold, so I don't know if Burton was unjustly not given the award for that. So they wake up one day and they find out that they're both Oscar nominees. They're living in Mexico, probably to escape paying taxes. Then he loses for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf while Liz wins, which pisses him off because he's very competitive with her. Then we see like more financial chaos and perfidy.
Bernard shows up to tell them that they're broke and says they could move to the middle of the ocean. So they decide to go live on a yacht. They were constantly dodging taxes, but it can't have helped that he would spend his entire salary for movies that were supposed to dig them out of the debt and bonk it on one piece of jewelry.
Yeah, this is like they're doing a lot of addict math and addict logic here, where it's like, in order to save money, we're going to live on a boat.
They've started printing the unflattering photos of her. And there's the whole thing about that everyone's making a fuss over her weight, but they've made no effort to show her weight vacillated rapidly. And they see where he beats out Aristotle Onassis to buy this enormous diamond.
He has a fight with his brother because they have no money, and because he's living the way that he's living. And then his brother seems to fall down a flight of stairs. It's all done in the dark, so we don't actually know.
Yeah, speaking of stairs, the stairs outside of what's supposed to be the Academy Awards theater, like anything where they're supposed to be at an awards show looks like they're shooting at the local community college. These stairs it just looks like it could be the back of anywhere.
The argument they have after he loses the Academy Award to Lee Marvin looks like it's happening in a high school.
Yeah.
His brother's now paralyzed and he goes into a funk about it and they get into a big fight. And then the next thing we know, she's having, I guess, all the John Donne books delivered, which I thought was fascinating because I was like, how quickly did she get that done? Because it seemed like they didn't talk to each other until she gave him those books as an apology.
Like, the Everyman's Library is a thing where it's been printed on high-quality paper and good binding for a long time. So these weren't antique or anything. It wouldn't have been that expensive. It was more that was thoughtful, and Lifetime is relying on the audience being too stupid. But my edition of Pride and Prejudice that I got at my bat mitzvah was an Everyman's edition. It was very nice. It had like this beautiful forest green binding and creamy paper on it.
Well, they got me. They have a big 40th birthday party for her, which she walks out of when people are mocking her and being like, oh, she still thinks she's a movie star. And then he gets a phone call that his brother is dead. He immediately starts drinking again. And then we remember that we have this black box framing device, which we haven't been back to in a while. And they start to talk about their relationship disintegrating. She finds out that he's hooking up with a co-star on the set of Bluebeard, and they separate and divorce. And they're talking about how infrequently they were ever alone together. I thought that was a really interesting comment and a thoughtful one that I have been sort of reflecting on that, and how the modern day Liz and Dick is obviously like Ben Affleck and J-Lo. And she seems to struggle with some of the same afflictions that Liz does around like this idea of I'm physically incapable of being alone. And I imagine the dynamic being very similar with them, where there is this sort of like, we're in love with the idea of being in love with each other. But when like it comes down to like sitting down and having dinner at a table together, or like I mean, I'm not suggesting that JLo takes out the trash, but when like quotidian life kicks in, like they can't handle it. And these two like seem to operate in this sort of illusion of like we're in love and we're always surrounded by people observing that, and what happens in those moments when we're alone, we don't even get them very often. So they're reflecting on that separation. And then the next thing we know, she's in the hospital with a broken leg and also something that might be colon cancer. That's her doctor is like, I'm not saying it's colon cancer, but ... Like he really does that to her. And also she's got these two broken legs. Like I was very confused as to what was afflicting her, but as we earlier observed, like she was always sick with something. And Richard rushes to be by her side and they remarry. But then they separate again because it can't sustain itself. And then he lies down and dies.
They cut back to the initial framing device, which is where he's much older and dying. And Burton was in terrible, terrible health at this point. His last role was as O'Brien in 1984, and he couldn't lift one of his arms all the way.
Drinking too much is bad, as we see in this movie.
And we see the White Diamonds era Liz, where I guess Lohan agreed to be aged up for this because at least she was skinny, even though just the suits from this era still don't look good to me, even though they've hit that point where they should start looking good again.
Never. Also, it's amazing how much she's aged, and Teresa Russell, who's playing her mom, is just like got just like a little bit of wrinkles.
Lohan, when she filmed this, was 3 years younger than Taylor is supposed to be at the beginning, and she still just looks so old before her time.
She collapses on the floor when she finds out that Richard Burton is dead. Like a Jenga tower, just like goes down.
Don't see the collapse. I feel like this is something where they must have brought in like a stunt extra to fall down.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't in her contract to like fall down convincingly or something.
Yeah, I mean, she might not have been able to do it.
She does a lot of sitting.
And then she goes to his gravestone, which is up in a week, which I was really impressed by. It takes a minute for you to get your gravestone up. But I guess if you're famous, it's different.
But doesn't like the earth have to settle into the mound for a bit?
The earth has to settle. Your remaining family members often have to go choose it. They have to order it. It might be different for famous people. The earth may settle a little bit faster when your star has descended. And the mass of that maybe pulls the earth into your tomb a little bit more quickly.
No, I think it's just sloppy filmmaking, actually.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then we cut back to the black box and we find out that, you know, she kept his letters that he wrote to her until she died.
Why would you not keep someone's letters until you die? Like, she had a lot of storage space.
Yeah, she had a lot of storage space. And, like, I could speculate wildly that if I went into my closet, I could find letters from people I downright loathe, not just from my 5th and 6th husband. Same man. I'm not particularly sold on their romance because of that. Maybe it's just like I'm old and broken and dark-hearted, but I think that she probably played into it because she knew that people felt it was romantic, like by saying like he was the great love of my life. He's the only one that mattered. And I'm like, I think Mike Todd mattered to you too. I think that Montgomery Clift and Rock Hudson were also great loves of her life, and the care that she showed for them throughout their lives is profound.
I just realized, while all of this is happening, her friend Montgomery Clift died.
Yeah, she saved his life. She performed an emergency tracheotomy on him.
Oh, and Clift dated Cleopatra co-star Roddy McDowell.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's so sad.
I would love to be a fly in the wire for her conversations about the whole thing with her gay boyfriends. Make a play out of that.
Yeah, make me a movie about her relationship with Montgomery Clift.
Yeah.
Or Rock Hudson. Like, I want to see that movie because I don't feel like this shows us inside of Liz Taylor. And this relationship, as I said, is not interesting to me.
What we don't see here about anyone portrayed in this film, we don't see what made them famous. We don't see that they were both great actors. Like, he had one of the best speaking voices of anyone recorded, and she was great and iconic in a lot of films, and we don't see why any of that would be here. This is a basket of tripe.
It's the same reason that I never want to be cast as Katharine Hepburn. Watching someone act poorly to play a great actor.
If you look at the bottom 10 SNL seasons, cast regulars on those do a better job at star imitations on a few days of rehearsal time than we see anyone do with anyone that they're playing in this.
Yeah. I don't doubt that Grant Buller is a talented enough actor in the things that he's in. This movie does nothing for anyone, but also the light inside Lindsay Lohan is so snuffed out in this film. She looks the part, but she is just on autopilot of reading these lines back. You cast these two people who cannot approximate the charisma of these two individuals. It's a huge bummer.
Oh, good God. And black box.
Ugh. I guess they're probably in hell.
If they're being made to watch this poorly executed sub 90-minute reenactment of their lives and comment on it as if they were taking it seriously for all eternity, then yes, that could be hell. I don't know what inspired this version of Inside the Actor's Studio.
I know, like, this shit's gotta get complicated in heaven, if heaven or hell or the afterlife, where you go and you sit in a black box with people that you dated or cared about or what have you. I guess like who decides who you go sit with? You know, she has 7 other husbands.
I don't know which one Mike Todd went to, but I feel like seeing her again would have been something he wanted to do in the afterlife.
It just seems like this is a very confusing way to hash that out. I mean, maybe there is a next room that she goes to where she's with Senator John Warner and they watch a passionless film about their relationship, whatever the hell happened there.
I did not have any choice dialogue in this except, I'm bored. I'm bored.
Yeah, that was my favorite. I don't have any other choice dialogue. Allow me to give our listeners a quick refresher about how we score movies. We rate our movies on a 1 to 10 scale across 10 areas that we find to be subjectively and or objectively important to most films, but specially tailored to specific issues particular to biopics. If you want more details on how we score movies, please scroll down our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com. You'll also find a record of our scores for past episodes.
I would also highly recommend listening to our special introductory episode, Who Are We and What Are We Doing?
And with that out of the way, let's score this thing.
For outward appearances, I was quite generous. I gave it a 4 because that hair and makeup artist was trying, and there were some parts where people looked good.
Same 4. Everybody was doing their best, and I will give a slight set of points for effort. Acting and casting, I gave it a 2, and that 2 is for David, it is for Creed, and it is for the butler.
See, I gave it a 3 because everybody else amounted to 1 point. I hadn't thought that much about the butler, but I did feel like David Eigenberg and Creed Bratton each deserved a point.
Agreed. Passage of Time, I gave it a 5.
I gave it a 4 because at least they tell you over and over again they did not make any effort to match up to how Liz looked at specific points.
I did like how many scenes had some sort of moment of it's 1965. What shall we do? Costuming, I gave a 3.
Okay, I gave it a 5 because anything that wasn't supposed to be a costume from Cleopatra, most of it looked pretty good. The suits looked decent, the party dresses looked decent. It's just that when they had to copy something that there was reason to remember, they didn't even try.
Quality of the script, I gave it a 2.
I did too. And that was just because it is a comparatively better script than The Conqueror.
Accuracy, I gave it 3.
I gave it a 3 as well.
Storytelling, I gave it a 4.
I gave it a 2 because of ways that they told the story. I do not like the black box.
Production value, I gave it a 2.
I gave it a 3.
Production direction, decision making, I gave it a 2.
I gave it a 3. Wow, that was nice of me. Do we care? I gave it a 2. I cared about David Eigenberg.
I have shared a lot of reasons why I care about Liz Taylor, none of which have to do with her relationship with Richard Burton.
My average came to 3.1, and I am using the by 2.1.
Awesome. I came to a 2.9.
So that came to 2.5. Liz and Dick, congratulations. You have earned a second opinion.
Second opinion is the element we stole from How Did This Get Made? The prize for scoring above an 8 or below a 4 is that you get to hear us make fun of IMDb reviewers who disagreed with our assessment of the film. First one. A Great Watch, written by George W.I. on the 17th of February, 2016, was blown away how engrossing this movie was. Lindsay Lohan and Grant Bowler were both excellent. After 10 minutes, I no longer saw the actors, just the characters. Lindsay was great. While her public life may not present so well, her acting has not suffered. In fact, it fitted the character like a glove. She does not deserve the negative reviews, which are biased and hateful, in my opinion. Good production values. A very good starting point for today's generation to understand the period. Made me want to know more. Thanks for an enjoyable watch, all. I mean, that's a very sweet review.
Has this reviewer watched any of Taylor or Burton's movies?
I mean, this seems like it's going to be a jumping off point for this reviewer to be deeply dissatisfied by about 9 movies. Because a lot of the movies they made are not great.
I just found one. Lindsay, a 9 out of 10. Lindsay was fantastic as Liz! Exclamation point, by De Chocolate Bonita 2309 on November 25th of 2012. I just finished watching the movie twice, thanks to DVR, and found it quite fantastic. It has been a while since Lindsay Lohan graced us with her acting ability on the screen, and I was glad to have seen it portrayed in this biopic story. The romance between Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton was very exposed and scrutinized in the public media, and the way they dealt with it, according to Liz and Dick movie, was usually through fights, usually with one of them ending in a drunken stupor. It was very entertaining and emotional at times. Grant Bowler also did an amazing job of portraying Burton. I give it 2 thumbs up. People should really see the movie more than once before rating it.
I can't imagine sitting through this movie twice. Don't sit through it once. It's not very good.
No, it's not. Is there anything that you would recommend that people watch or read instead of Liz and Dick?
I would recommend, if you're looking to get your Liz Taylor fix, watching Suddenly Last Summer or Giant. Those are 2 amazing movies she's in. Also A Place in the Sun. And there's a spectacular documentary about her on HBO, as well as a really, really good one about Rock Hudson, who was a very close friend of hers. So I would recommend immersing yourself in other Liz culture.
Giant is the best Liz Taylor movie. Although the aging techniques they had back then, Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor have a lot of white shoe polish in their hair by the end of Giant.
So does James Dean. He looks ridiculous.
See Mean Girls if you want an example of why everyone keeps cutting Lohan slack after all these years and feels sad about her. While procrastinating this, on watching this, I read a really good novel called The Bear and the Nightingale, which has nothing to do with any of this, but it's historical fantasy set in 1350s Russia, with figures from Slavic mythology having conflict with the Greek Orthodox Church of the era. And I also started watching a series called Tipping the Velvet about lesbianism in Victorian London that was very fun, all while procrastinating dealing with Liz and Dick. I would recommend those, even though they have absolutely nothing to do with Liz and Dick. Shall we wrap it up?
If you liked the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and tell a friend, or better yet, plural friends, and share us on social media. We hear it helps. You can follow us on Instagram, where we have visual aids from our episodes. Our Instagram handle is @BioPicAPodcastStory. So check us out there, and we'll link to that in our show notes as well. And please also check out our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com to see the official episode ratings for all of the movies that we've done so far. If you would like to get in touch, you can email us at biopiclistenermailbag@gmail.com.
Tune in next week when we'll be talking about Ed Wood with our very first guest star, comedian Liam McEnany. Sarah, can you tell us a bit about Liam?
I am so excited that we are going to have him as a guest star. So he is a comedian, producer, and writer. He has been doing stand-up since he was 19. He has appeared on Showtime, on IFC, on Comedy Central, CNN, Headline News. He spent 2 seasons as a panelist on one of the best shows in the history of time, which is VH1's Best Week Ever. He's also appeared on a bunch of other things, including WTF with Mark Maron and the Howard Stern Wrap-Up Show. He's quite brilliant, all of the things that he has done. I do not have enough time at the end of this episode to promote his full bio, but we're really excited to have him on and to hear what he has to say about Ed Wood.
Yeah.
And with that, have a wonderful night.